3, 2, 1, go.
Hi, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. On behalf of Glaze, we'd like to extend a very warm welcome for joining Sharing Global View today. Sharing Global Views is part of Sharing Economy Initiative, which aims to make the world more sustainable step by step. If you have any topics that you would like to share or discuss relating to sharing economy and green development, we welcome you to share with us with our social media platform. So, Tua, how are you, and what's our topic today?
Thank you so much, Helena, and welcome everyone. Come back to Sharing Global View again. Now, again, we're talking about a very global perspective, have very different views from around the world. And we have global audience from business professions to industry leaders, and there are also students coming around. So what we're trying to achieve here is to getting everyone start to be interested in asking questions about global issues. And we actually been focusing on very different industries. And today, we're really going back to one of the very original ideas of having this program is to promote sharing economy. At the end, we want to promote sustainability. And we really want to welcome our main host of the day, President Figueres, who is also the standing chairman of GLAZE, to start to introduce what GLAZE is about and also our very important, interesting topic in the audience, and also our main speaker of the day. Thank you. How are you, President?
Thank you, Elena and T. Good evening in Asia and good morning here in Latin America. Godfrey, midday. I hope you're having a good day, Mr. Castro, in Europe. So GLAZE, the Global Alliance for Sharing Economy, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with the mission of promoting the values, the concepts, the tenets of a sharing global economy. An economy that looks after the well-being of people on the one side with an increasing global population, but that also looks at the well-being of the planet, which is not getting any bigger and which, as we all know, has finite resources. Over the last year, we have held a series of conversations on how we can best share the global economy, creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to innovate and create new business models, and at the same time benefit people and planet. And today we have a very interesting conversation with Mr. Rene Castro, a good friend who is responsible at FAO, the Food and Agriculture International, or the Food and Agriculture Organization, based in Italy, for many of the innovative and creative projects that have to do with the growing of trees, amongst other things. As we all know, when we grow trees, we sequester carbon from the atmosphere and we fix it or create it into biomass. And as such, trees have become a frontline soldier, so to speak, in the fight against climate change. A shared perspective on the use of technology for the monitoring, reporting, and verification of tree growing and of carbon sequestration around the world therefore becomes a very, very important and critical tool in terms of knowing what countries are doing, how they're going about it, and how much carbon we are fixing. Rene will speak to us about that this morning. He holds a doctorate in design with emphasis in natural resources, policy, and environmental economics, and a master's degree in public administration, both from the University of Harvard. Rene is also a distinguished lecturer at prestigious universities, Harvard, Tokyo, Yale, Zurich, LSE, INCAE, and many other Latin American universities. He has held several ministerial positions in Costa Rica between 1994 and 2014, as a Minister of Environment, Energy, and Telecommunications, and as a Minister of Foreign Affairs. Today, he is the Assistant Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, with emphasis on the Forestry Department based in Rome, Italy. René, thank you for joining us on this conversation. And the floor is yours to discuss how we can share everything that has to do with the monitoring, reporting, and verification processes which you lead globally.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President Figueres. Good morning to Latin America. Buen pranzo here in Italy, and good evening in Asia. Let me share with you a short presentation that should help us to understand why forest is so important and why, without sharing, it's extremely difficult to cooperate, to understand the issues, to connect public and private sector, and we have no time to lose, no room to inefficiency. Let me show first this graph. The red line is what we are doing. This is business as usual, and it is expected that with some adjustments by 2100, we will be above 30 gigatons per year of CO2. That will mean a collapse. The change in temperature will be from 3.5 to 5.3 to 5.3. The other line, the green line, is the one recommended by the scientists. And they are saying the limit is 10 gigatons because by 2100, we will be 10 billion people. And the maximum the atmosphere can absorb is 1 ton per capita per year. If that is achieved, the temperature will be between 0.9 and 2.3 Celsius. The Paris Agreement is something in between, but closer to the red line. In this moment, the world is more closer to the red line than to any other scenario. And what is happening? Why are we so close to the red line if everybody's talking the talk? Well, not very much is happening, and not many countries and corporations are walking the walk. Let me show you. This is the state of the world forest today. 45% is tropical, like in Costa Rica, where President Figueres is, or Central Africa, or Southern China and Philippines. 27% is boreal, like in Siberia or Northern Canada. 16% is temperate, like in Europe or in the US. And 11% is subtropical. And we have been losing annually from 16 million hectares a year to 10, which is the orange part. Recently, we started to do some reforestation, some planting, which is the green part. But as you can see, even with that action, in the last 5 years, the net is that we are losing 5 million hectares per year. So this is part of the red situation. We are emitting CO2 even from the forest, in addition to the transportation, the energy, the waste, and other sources. But we have an opportunity here, and I'm going to show you why. And also, regionally speaking, Asia is doing better in terms of recovering. Europe did also a little bit of the effort of restoration, but Central America, South America, and Africa are net deforesters in the last decade. And what is causing this deforestation? Essentially, agriculture. Part of it, subsistence agriculture, like for example, in Africa, you can see the orange part is commercial, the bluish is subsistence, the red is mining, the yellow is infrastructure, and the light blue is urban expansion. But essentially about 70–80% are connected with agriculture, and especially with inefficient agriculture. Remember that FAO has published that about 30% of the total food produced is wasted. Half of it in the crop land and half of it at the retail level in the supermarkets. Why then are we still optimistic? Why, I'm questioning here, why forest is a relevant player in the climate equation? First of all, because we still have 2 billion hectares of degraded land in the world, and about half of it could be restored without competing with agriculture, with existing forests, or with cities. If we restore that, we will gain probably 15–20 years of breathing time, waiting for the transportation and the energy to catch up and do the long-term solution. Additionally, this is a very simple equation. When a country or a corporation or you at the household will like to do your contribution, you can apply this simple equation. Emissions minus reductions minus compensation should be equal to 0. This is what means to be CO2 neutral. If it is at the country level, like in Costa Rica, for example, about 20–30% of the target will be reductions in transportation and electricity. And about 70–80% will be in forest land use, including pasture land, agroforestry, and these kind of things. At the end should be 0. Remember that the scientists recommended us a maximum of 10 gigatons per year. And if we are 10 billion people in the year 2100, that will mean 1 ton per capita. So if you do 0, like we are proposing here, it's even better. If you are a carbon neutral country, it's even better. If you are a carbon neutral company, you are contributing. If you are a household doing this equation in your house, with your lights, with your water pipes, with your gardens, you are contributing. So to be carbon neutral is going beyond the average that the scientific community is requesting, and will make you a model citizen, a model company, a model country. You will be a pioneer. And this is easy to say, but very hard to do. Let me show you some examples. This is what Costa Rica did years ago to neutralize carbon in coffee. How they did that? First of all, reducing water. Secondly, reusing the coffee skins and waste into gas for energy, into compost for replacing chemical fertilizers, in recovering, the paper, reducing the fuels they are using in the distribution, and essentially doing the industrial process dry rather in using intensively water or using the rivers. So small Costa Rica did that. And then big Brazil came and they said, we can do the same in the beef production, in the cattle industry. So Brazil started to train, and they combine and change the way they produce their beef, mixing, as you can see here, trees with better pasture. So it is good as a windbreak, it's good as to enrich the nutrients, it's good for carbon credits, it fixes nitrogen, it reduces the thermal impact on the cows, and produce a better welfare and thermal comfort. And every 7-8 years, the cattle growers will have the trees to produce wood. And then they cut these trees and replace them with new trees, fixing additionally CO2. And then they compensate the emissions of the cows. So remember the question, emissions minus reduction minus compensation should be equal to 0. Brazil is now testing about or planning to do about 22 million hectares in this CO2 neutral beef production. So, Mr. President, when you were in charge of Costa Rica in 1997, we did this first CO2 transaction, and this is a photo of the first in the world. Costa Rica and Norway, the deal was for 200,000 tons, $10 per ton, so it was a 2 million deal, and it was a certificate like that, what the Norwegians receive, and they could monitor the actions in the farm, and Costa Rica got the money to do an additional investment either in land and at that time in renewable energy. So what happened? Why the Costa Rica and the other countries are not already CO2 neutral? Why are we saying that we need to share in order to advance? Well, what happened is that it was extremely difficult to do every farm, to monitor every project, to explain it to investors. It was extremely difficult to the investors then to follow and report and verify what they bought. So I will finish this presentation proposing that an additional step will be to do at the global scale what Costa Rica and others did 20 years ago. And in order to have an impact and restoring about half of the 2 billion hectares degraded today, we need to share and we need to standardize. And let me tell you why. What we did in the past is what is here in red. We did small scale projects. Everybody developed their own instruments. It was unfamiliar to non-financial performance metrics like CO2 tons or CO2 equivalent. What is that? The bankers ask. And it was a large number of public and private actors. So it was extremely difficult for the buyers to believe that the people doing the monitoring, the reporting, and the verification, they spoke the same language. So it was very expensive, time consumed, was huge. What we're suggesting now is that we need to broker deals, we need data and MRV coordination, monitoring, reporting, and verification coordination. We need a knowledge hub to train the people, and we need standards, and we need standardized metrics to do this. Is this possible to do? Definitely. This is the last attempt Costa Rica did in 2018. The small country launched what is called a CubeSat, a tiny satellite. And this satellite what they did was to measure the forest growth and the carbon fixation in real time. And they sent the data to the Costa Rican Technology Institute, and they reported back. So for the first time, you could know every 8 hours how was the carbon doing in the Costa Rican forest and how the forest was there in the field. So I cannot imagine that the only solution will be that every country will need to launch their own satellite. We don't need 194 satellites to do this. So we need to share the technology, we need to standardize, and we need to agree MRV in the COP26 coming under Article 6, and entities like FAO, like UNEP, like UNDP could help to develop this MRV standardized globally, so that will be giving confidence to the investors, will be giving confidence to the countries compensating internationally, and to those supplying the CO2 to fulfill the Paris Agreement. I stop here, Mr. President, but if we share, we can have this in 10, 15 years as a major breathing opportunity for the world coming from the forest of the world. Thank you very much.
Rene, thank you very much for your presentation. What a tremendous amount of common sense to be able to replant those millions of hectares of degraded land with trees that would give us the breathing space in terms of lowering carbon emissions until, as you say, the longer term systemic solutions kick in, which have to do mainly with energy consumption in the world. So, friends, if you have questions for Mr. Castro, please put them forward through our LinkedIn or our website, and we will gladly pose them to Mr. Castro. Rene, if I may begin with a first question, how do you envision the governance of this shared MRV system working? Who is responsible for the satellites, the information that they provide, bringing that to the local countries? Who does all of that work so that it is transparent and at the same time reliable?
We have all the infrastructure in place. We have already all the satellites that will be needed are there. There are instruments like FAO, for example. We are training as we speak all of Africa with a harmonized technology called Collect Earth, and we are in partnership with Google and with the European Sentinel and other options. So this could be offered now. There is no time to waste on that. What is needed is that the Convention of Climate Change should decide in the COP26 which units will be the ones recognized. For example, will be only the CO2 units or will be the CO2 equivalent units? So we will be including other gases like methane, calculating the equivalence in terms of CO2. And to measure it is a combination. I mean, if the standards are the same, if the technology is harmonized, there will be, 15, 20 different entities, both public and private, reliable, totally ready to start doing this monitoring and reporting. And some others are already prepared to independently do the verification. And because everything should be registered under the UNFCCC Secretariat, there is no chance for double counting. If you are not registered in the Secretariat, it doesn't count. It's not worth for compensating your national responsibilities. So it's essential a political decision that probably Glasgow will provide.
Thank you very much, Rene. Any questions coming in, T. Elena?
Yes, sir. We have one. So, Professor, we have one here that, when we see on the graph that the prediction goes to 100 to 100. So they actually require a continual process towards this. So what would you see that the younger, say, from the professions to the university students can draw forward on that? And also, how would you say that if there's a business network with their corporate social responsibility can work in collaboratively towards this effort?
Just before joining here, I was part of a conference between FAO and UNEP about an effort where the youth is leading this restoration idea. And the youth is leading small projects at the community level or national projects or working with corporations. Again, remember, we're talking here about 2 billion hectares of degraded land, and 900 million of those are suitable to restore. So planting one tree is very important, and planting 1,000 is even more important, 1 million even more important, but you can work on any level. Secondly, you can help to join entities around the world like FAO and UNEP, monitoring the health of the forests. And the data is available now, is public. You can enter the websites, check the data, verify if your region is doing as the countries are saying or are doing better or worse. You can challenge the models that the scientists are doing and push them to make them better. And finally, you can train yourself. FAO, for example, provide a training for an app that is called Exact, that train you how to calculate the CO2 of a farm. Not a theoretical one, but the real one. How to go to the farm, calculate the CO2 of a crop, or if there is livestock, or if there is energy production in that farm. And then you can provide what is the real CO2 emissions per hectare per year. And that help that farmer to join either the market when it is established, or to join the national effort when they have other options rather than the market. Over.
Thank you, Rene. We have another question, Rene, that says, can we use this technology to monitor forest growth that could help prevent sandstorms?
We can use it. I'm not totally sure to prevent sandstorms, but to mitigate those, yes. We can also use it to monitor forest fires in real time, and is available, is public access. And as I said, we are using all satellite available in the world, and the answer is yes. Let me finish with this. In 1997, when I showed the CO2 title, to prove the existence of those CO2 certificates, or those CO2 fixed in the trees, we needed a group of experts, we needed aircraft, and we needed experts to do the mathematics. It took us 1.5 years and it cost us about $2 million. 1997, but that was one of the first in the world doing the theoretical and the field ground truthing. 2 years ago, I did the same just to check the numbers for Costa Rica and the European Union. These two totally different scales. It took me 1 week and it cost me $10,000 for Costa Rica. 10 days for Europe, and it cost me $20,000 for Europe. And the results, plus minus 2%. So the world has changed. And all this is in the public domain. And what we need now is to standardize it and to train more and more people to use the tools that are developed and available. Over.
Fantastic that we now have those tools that enable us then, with the level of accuracy that you have just mentioned, to measure how we are returning degraded lands to forests, or if we're losing forests, which was one of the graphs, of course, that you showed with us. And fantastic to learn how the costs and the time has shrunk in terms of monitoring this over time. Elena, I think we have time for one more question. Do we have something coming in from the audience?
Yes, we have another one. So could you please address the local and the global connection of MRV? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this is very important. The local connection is what is relevant for a farmer. How a small farmer will connect and receive their payments for the CO2 services they are providing. And why is this connected to the global and to the conventions? Well, the connection is essentially a political decision. The convention will need to decide this coming November 2021 in Scotland who and how will be measured and what is a CO2 tone or offset and what is not. And that definition is the source of negotiations. That is relevant to define the final price for a service that a small farmer will be doing in his property. But the farmer will be more interested in working with a forest engineer or a young enhanced remote sensing expert to calculate what is the capacity of his farm. So in addition to producing oranges or producing coffee, they will also need to estimate how many CO2 tons he is fixing annually in his soil, in his pasture, in his orange trees or in his coffee trees. And then if he has a net fixation, he should be able to collect some payment for that. So that will be an additional income for the farmer. The example I provided about Brazil, there is a third income source, which is the use of the wood of some of the trees planted that will be replaced every 7 years. You know, when you plant trees with cattle, those are usually trees for wood or for energy. And those will provide you with an extra income. So it will be the cattle, it will be the CO2 fixation, and it will be the wood production. That is what is relevant for the farmer. Thank you. Over to you, Elena.
So Rene, if I may, because we're almost out of time now, but one final thought from you, if I may, in terms of what are the impediments today for this to become mainstream, for this to escalate, for countries to come on board, because it makes so much sense for the planet in terms of reducing carbon emissions, it makes so much sense for the countries in terms of their committing or their fulfillment of their carbon emission reductions. And it makes so much economic sense at the farmer level. So what's holding this back in your thoughts?
Well, I would say there are no unanimous response from the countries to this. I can distinguish three groups. One group totally opposed to any use of market instruments. And we know that those countries, and that's a small group, but they do exist, and they want to do only things internally in their domestic economy. Then there is the other extreme. There is another group, for example, the European Union and some states in the US and Canada, that they would like to do things based essentially in the market that should be tradable. So when it is tradable, in addition to what I just commented, you will need a number in the certificate to make sure that it is not duplicate and is not double counted. And that group is trying to do that, and the price of carbon when you do that is higher. It goes up above $20 per ton of carbon. And then there is a third group, which is the majority of the countries, including your country president and others, that will prefer to calculate the CO2 fix, but they will prefer to keep it for their own national obligations instead of selling it. So this group will receive a payment that is called payment based on results. So you do all the process, but then you don't emit the certificate and you don't sell it in the market. You keep it yourself. And that will recognize you about $5 per ton. So essentially the answer will be, it is a sovereign decision which route you will choose. But today, at least everybody is concerned, and everybody is leaning toward doing more and not doing less. And finally, everybody is leaning toward the idea that planting trees and restoring land with pasture land, for example, or managing black soils will give us what I call breathing time. Will give us 10, 15 years of time. Meanwhile, the technology in transportation and energy is fully mature and take the burden or the load for the longer term. Over to you, Mr. President.
Rene, thank you very much for a most interesting conversation on the use of technology available today, low cost, real time, to further the importance of MRV in terms of monitoring how we are dealing with our forests around the world and how they can help mitigate the carbon emissions and lower climate change effects on the planet. Thank you also, Rene, for leading the charge from FAO and working with many nations around the world to promote this, which makes absolute sense for planet, countries, and people. T, can I please ask you to introduce the conversation we are going to have on the sharing economy 2 weeks from today?
Thank you so much, President. Yes, I will do. Thank you so much, Mr. Castro. Normally, we're having you have another last takeaway message to everyone, but if you allow me to introduce the next section first. So next section, we're going to have something quite different, but I think it can be in the level and have a similar view to that. Now, we're going to have somewhere from Austria, Vienna, the Art Center. So we're going to have someone very interesting to share us with interesting sharing economy ideas to share art. So what they're gonna do is they bring a lot of artists together to working with universities, students, and to be effectively create that into a art renting, art sharing business, which is really helping a global distribution of the real soul of what people really wanted, the art and their spirits towards this. So how this is going to progress and how this is going to be successful running, we actually going to do that a bit in a succession. We're going to have in the next 2 weeks having him to speak about at the beginning stage of this project. And as this progressing in a few months later, we're going to have another view of how this is actually tracking. So it could be quite interesting to follow. So I wouldn't say too much about Mr. Marcos' speech in 2 weeks' time, but looking forward to meet you on that. And now, President, I'll leave it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, T. Thank you, Elena. And thank you, Godfrey. And thank you again, Renee, for having joined us on this conversation about GLAZE, the Global Alliance for the Sharing Economy, and how we can promote these values around the world. We wish you a very good week, and we see you next time, as T has mentioned, to discuss how we can share art and contribute in that way to the sharing economy. Goodbye and have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.